At a well-known university in a busy city, there was a professor named Dr. Michael Carter. He was a very smart man. People called him a liberal professor because he often talked about new ideas and questioned old ways of thinking. We taught subjects like philosophy and culture. Many students liked him because he was confident and spoke with passion. But some people thought he was too harsh when he talked about famous people. One day, Dr. Carter appeared on a popular talk show on television. The show was about culture, movies, and famous people. The host asked him about his opinions on celebrities and how smart they are. Dr. Carter did not hesitate. He said he thought many celebrities were not very intelligent, and he was tired of people treating them like geniuses. He said that just because someone is famous or strong does not mean they are smart. Then, Dr. Carter surprised everyone. He mentioned a famous actor and martial artist named Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was known for his tough roles in movies and television. He was also the star of many funny jokes on the internet. These jokes made it seem like Chuck Norris could do impossible things, like stopping time or defeating entire armies by himself. But Dr. Carter said that these jokes were silly and did not mean Chuck Norris was truly smart. He said he doubted Chuck Norris had a high IQ or could pass a real intelligence test. The audience was shocked. Many people liked Chuck Norris and thought he was not only strong, but clever. Some laughed at the professor's words, while others waited to see what would happen next. The talk show host asked Dr. Carter if he wanted to challenge Chuck Norris in some way. Without thinking twice, the professor said he would challenge Chuck Norris to take an IQ test. He wanted to prove, once and for all, that he was smarter than the action star. Dr. Carter's challenge quickly became a big story. Reporters and newspapers picked it up and talked about it everywhere. People on social media shared it and discussed it. Some people agreed with the professor and said famous stars should not be praised for things they did not earn. Others thought the professor was being unfair and disrespectful. They said that intelligence is not only about books and tests, and that Chuck Norris had other kinds of smartness. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris heard about the challenge. He was at his home reading the news. He smiled quietly. Chuck was not a man to brag or fight in public words. He had lived a long life, training in martial arts, acting, and helping others. He knew that intelligence came in many forms. Decided he would accept the challenge. But he would do it in his own way, with calm and respect. Chuck's friends, and family told him not to worry too much about the test. They said it was just a silly challenge from a professor who wanted attention. But Chuck believed that this was an opportunity to show people that they should not judge others by their looks or fame. He wanted to prove that even someone known for physical strength could be smart in real life. At the same time, Dr. Carter was getting ready for the test. He was very confident, spent hours reviewing puzzles, logic questions, and brain teasers. He believed that his years of study and teaching had prepared him well. He did not think Chuck Norris would be able to keep up with him. The professor thought this test would be easy to win. The news media followed every step. Interviews with Dr. Carter showed a man full of pride and determination. Interviews with Chuck Norris showed a humble man who wanted to do his best, but did not want to make a big show of it. The contrast between the two men made the story even more interesting to the public. As the day for the IQ test approached, excitement grew. Many people said they would watch the results. Would the professor prove that brains were better than brawn? Or would Chuck Norris surprise everyone with his smarts? The city buzzed with questions, and the story spread to many countries. People who did not know Chuck Norris well started to learn more about him. They found out he was a skilled martial artist, a kind person, and a hard worker. They saw that intelligence was not only in school or books, but also in life experience, quick thinking, and calm decision-making. Many began to hope that Chuck Norris would do well in the test. On the other hand, some of Dr. Carter's colleagues in the university worried that the professor was putting too much trust in this challenge. They felt it might be a trap. What if Chuck Norris scored higher than expected? What would that mean for the professor's reputation? But Dr. Carter ignored the warnings. He was determined to show the world that academic knowledge and intelligence mattered most. For him, this was a chance to teach a lesson to those who admired celebrities without Question: the tension between the two men was like a story from a movie. The quiet, humble fighter against the proud, loud professor. People started to compare them in jokes and memes, but many also waited respectfully to see what would happen. The day of the test was set in a quiet office in a neutral place. It was important that the test be fair and real. Both men agreed on the rules and the organization that would give the test. The questions would be from a well-known IQ test company, respected for its fairness and accuracy. Dr. Carter arrived early, dressed in a suit, looking confident and ready. Chuck Norris came dressed simply, but with calm strength. They shook hands, politely, each with their own thoughts. As the test began, the professor quickly answered many questions. He smiled and looked sure of himself. Chuck Norris took his time, thinking carefully. He did not rush, but his answers showed deep understanding and good sense. Outside the testing room, people waited anxiously. Porters, fans, students, and strangers all wanted to know who would win. The test was not just about numbers or scores. It was about respect, about breaking stereotypes, and about showing that intelligence can come from many places. This challenge, started by a bold professor and accepted by a humble action star, had captured the world's attention. It was a moment when two very different men met in a quiet room to see who was smarter and maybe to learn something new about themselves and each other. After the challenge was announced, Chuck Norris took some time to think about it carefully. He was not the kind of man who liked to boast or fight with words. He had lived a long and full life, filled with many experiences that taught him lessons about respect, patience, and hard work. When he heard that Dr. Carter, the professor, had challenged him to an IQ test, Chuck was surprised, but not upset. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to show something important. Chuck understood that many people had a wrong idea about intelligence. Some thought that being smart meant only knowing facts from books or doing well on tests. But Chuck knew that real intelligence was also about wisdom, experience, and the ability to solve problems in everyday life. He wanted to remind people that intelligence can take many forms. So, he decided to accept the challenge, but he would do it his own way. Quietly and with respect, his family and friends gathered around to talk about the upcoming test. They were proud of Chuck, but also worried. They knew the professor was a very educated man who had spent years studying in universities. They told Chuck he did not have to prove anything to anyone, but Chuck said, "It's not about proving something to others. It's about showing respect for knowledge, no matter where it comes from." This calm and humble attitude made people admire him even more. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter was busy preparing for the test. He'd never faced a challenge like this before, especially not from a celebrity known more for fighting skills than brain power. But the professor was confident. He believed his years of study and teaching had made him smarter than anyone else. He thought this IQ test would be easy for him, and he expected to win without any problem. Dr. Carter spent long hours going over books, puzzles, and IQ practice questions. He wanted to make sure he was ready. The students and colleagues talked about the challenge too. Some thought it was a silly idea, but others were curious to see what would happen. The professor's confidence grew each day, and he made many public statements about how he was sure he would win the test. As the test day came closer, the story spread beyond the city and country. People everywhere were talking about the challenge. Between the smart professor and the strong actor, news stations interviewed experts about IQ tests and what they really measured. Some experts said that IQ tests only measured certain kinds of intelligence, like logic and problem solving, but not everything. Others said that anyone could prepare for these tests and improve their scores. Chuck Norris listened to all the talk, but stayed quiet. He believed that actions spoke louder than words. He did not want to fight with the professor or argue on television. Instead, he focused on staying calm and ready. Chuck did a little studying too, but he did not try to become a test expert. Instead, he thought about the skills he had learned from his life: quick thinking, discipline, and patience. On the night before the test, Chuck felt peaceful. He spent time with his family, talking and laughing. He said, "Tomorrow is not just about the test. It's about showing that people can be respectful to each other, even if they are very different. His family felt proud of his gentle attitude and strong spirit. Dr. Carter, on the other hand, was still busy preparing. He stayed up late going over complicated questions and puzzles. He wanted to be perfect. He was sure that this test would prove he was smarter than Chuck Norris. But deep inside, a small voice wondered if he was taking the challenge too seriously. Still, he pushed those thoughts away and focused on winning. Finally, the test day arrived. The place was quiet and serious. A professional testing company had been hired to give the IQ test fairly. Both Chuck Norris and Dr. Carter arrived on time. They shook hands with respect, showing good sportsmanship. The people watching felt the tension in the air. It was a meeting of two very different men, both ready to face the challenge. The test began with simple questions and slowly moved to harder puzzles. Dr. Carter quickly answered many questions with confidence. He smiled, thinking this was going just as he expected. But Chuck Norris did not rush. He took his time to read each question carefully. He used his experience and common sense to solve problems. Sometimes he looked thoughtful, other times calm. As the test continued, it became clear that Chuck was doing better than many had expected. He was not just guessing, he was solving problems with logic and skill. The professor noticed this and started to feel a little uneasy. For the first time, he wondered if he had underestimated Chuck Norris. The people who watched the test from behind the scenes began to talk quietly. They saw how focused both men were. They knew this was not just a test of IQ, but a test of character and respect. Many felt inspired by Chuck's calm and humble way of handling the challenge. When the test ended, both men handed in their papers. There was a short moment of silence. The people in the room waited patiently while the professional graders started to review the answers. The tension was high, but no one said a word. Everyone was curious but respectful. Finally, the results were ready. The room filled with reporters, fans, and friends. The scores would show who was smarter according to the test. Dr. Carter stood tall, confident. Chuck Norris smiled quietly, ready to accept whatever happened. When the scores were announced, something surprising happened. Chuck Norris had scored in the high average to above average range. He had answered many questions correctly, especially in areas like problem solving and pattern recognition. The professor also scored well, but not as high as Chuck in some key sections. The news spread like wildfire. People talked about how Chuck Norris had shown that intelligence was not only about studying books, but also about life experience and thinking clearly. Many praised Chuck for his humble attitude and respect. Some people who had doubted him now saw him in a new light. Dr. Carter felt shocked. He'd expected to win easily, but now he had to face the truth. His pride was hurt, but he knew he had to accept the results. The experience taught him a lesson about not underestimating others, and about the many different forms of intelligence. After the test, Chuck Norris spoke to reporters. He said, "I am not here to prove I am smarter than anyone. I just want people to remember that respect and kindness matter. Intelligence is not only about tests. It's about how we treat others and how we learn every day." His words touched many hearts. The professor also made a statement. He said, "This challenge has opened my eyes. I see now that intelligence is more than numbers and titles. I respect Chuck Norris for accepting the challenge with dignity. I will think more carefully before judging others." The story of the IQ test between the liberal professor and Chuck Norris became an example for many. It showed how respect, humility, and open minds could bring people together, even if they come from very different worlds. It reminded everyone that true intelligence shines through actions, kindness, and learning in all parts of life. The day of the IQ test was filled with quiet excitement and nervous energy. The testing room was small but bright, with a long table in the middle. The walls had soft colors, and there were no distractions. Both men, Dr. Michael Carter, the proud liberal professor, and Chuck Norris, the humble martial artist and actor, sat side by side, ready to begin. An official from the testing company explained the rules carefully. The test would last about 2 hours, and the questions would measure different parts of intelligence. There would be logic puzzles, pattern recognition, math problems, language skills, and memory tasks. The goal was to be fair and professional, so no one could cheat or get extra help. Dr. Carter seemed confident. He straightened his papers and sat up tall. Oh. He looked over at Chuck and smiled slightly, thinking he already had the win. Chuck Norris, calm and steady, nodded politely. He did not rush or show any signs of nervousness. To him, this was just a challenge like many others he had. Faced in life, something to approach with patience and focus. The first few questions were easy for both men. They had to solve simple puzzles, recognize shapes, to answer basic math problems. Dr. Carter answered quickly, tapping his pencil and scribbling notes. Chuck took a little more time reading each question carefully before writing his answer. Some people watching later said this showed Chuck's careful thinking and attention to detail. As the test moved into harder questions, things became more interesting. There were tricky logic puzzles where one had to find a hidden pattern or solve a riddle using clues. Dr. Carter looked very focused, his eyes scanning the page as he tried to work fast. Norris sometimes smiled quietly as if the puzzles reminded him of problems he solved in real life. One of the most difficult parts was a set of math problems. They were not only about numbers, but about understanding how things fit together. The professor used his strong academic background to solve most quickly. But Chuck surprised many when he correctly answered the trickiest questions, not by fast calculation, but by thinking through the problems step by step. A few times during the test, Chuck paused and seemed to reflect deeply. He used not only what he knew, but also common sense and experience from years of training and problem solving outside school. For example, one question asked about a pattern in a series of shapes. While the professor tried complicated formulas, Chuck looked at the pictures and saw the pattern naturally. This showed that intelligence is not just about book knowledge, but also about seeing things clearly. Some observers later said that Chuck's way of solving problems showed wisdom that comes from life experience. He was not trying to be the fastest, but was aiming to be accurate and thoughtful. This quiet confidence made many respect him even more. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter began to feel a small worry inside. He noticed Chuck's answers were often correct, and sometimes even better than his own. The professor had expected an easy win, but now he realized this would not be simple. His smile faded a little, replaced by a serious look. Still, the professor pushed himself harder. He wanted to finish the test strong. He worked quickly through the remaining questions, solving word problems and memory tasks. He wrote notes, checked his answers, and did not want to make mistakes. Chuck, on the other hand, stayed calm, took his time with the last few questions. He knew that rushing could cause errors. He used the skills he had learned from many years of martial arts training, patience, focus, and clear thinking. He understood that this test was about much more than proving who was smarter. It was about showing respect for knowledge and for each other. As the test ended, the official collected all the papers carefully. Both men stood up and shook hands again. They thanked the staff and left the room quietly. Neither spoke much, but the respect between them was clear. Outside, the media waited eagerly. Reporters asked questions, but Chuck Norris smiled and said, "We both did our best. That's what matters." Dr. Carter nodded and said, "I'm confident in the effort I put in." But inside, both men were thinking deeply about what the test had shown them. Over the next few days, the test papers were graded by experts. The results were prepared carefully to be fair and accurate. The tension grew as more people waited to learn who had scored higher. When the scores were finally announced, the results surprised many. Chuck Norris scored very well. In some sections, especially in pattern recognition and problem solving, he scored higher than Dr. Carter. The professor's score was also strong, but not as high as he had hoped. This news spread quickly. People talked about how Chuck Norris had challenged the stereotype of celebrities being only good at acting or sports. They saw that intelligence can be broad and include life skills, common sense, and quiet wisdom. Many praised Chuck for accepting the challenge with grace. He had shown that respect and humility are as important as intelligence. The professor, though a little embarrassed, accepted the results with dignity. He said that this experience taught him to be open-minded and to respect different kinds of intelligence. The story became more than just about an IQ test. It was about two very different men. One, a respected academic, and the other, a famous action star, coming together to show that intelligence is not one simple thing. It can be many things: knowledge, wisdom, respect, and the courage to face challenges honestly. People everywhere were inspired. Schools talked about the story and lessons about respect and learning. News programs discussed how society should value different kinds of intelligence. And fans of Chuck Norris shared the story proudly, happy that their hero had proved himself in a new way. For Chuck Norris, the experience was not about winning or losing. It was about showing respect to others and to knowledge itself. He continued to live quietly, teaching martial arts, helping communities, and being a positive example. Dr. Carter, on the other hand, became more thoughtful. He realized that intelligence is not just about grades or tests, but about being open, respectful, and humble. He told his students to remember this lesson and to never judge others too quickly. The challenge between the liberal professor and Chuck Norris became a symbol, showed that we should look beyond labels and stereotypes. It reminded everyone that true intelligence is about learning, growing, and treating others with respect. After the results of the IQ test were shared and the world had its say, life slowly returned to normal for both Chuck Norris and Dr. Michael Carter. But for each of them, the experience left a deep mark that shaped how they thought about intelligence, respect, and even themselves. Chuck Norris continued his life much as before. He was known for his martial arts skills, his movies, and his calm, humble nature. But after the challenge, more people began to see him in a new light. They realized that being strong and famous did not mean you could not be smart, wise, and respectful at the same time. Chuck never used this opportunity to boast or show off. Instead, he spoke often about the importance of humility. In many interviews and talks after the challenge, Chuck shared a simple message: intelligence is not just about knowing facts or getting good scores on tests. It is about how you solve problems in everyday life, how you treat other people, and how open you are to learning new things. He reminded people that wisdom comes from experience, patience, and kindness. These qualities, he said, are just as important as any test score. Chuck's words touched many people. Young and old listened to his message and felt inspired to look at intelligence in a new way. Parents told their children about the story, hoping to teach them that respect and humility are the true marks of a smart person. Teachers used the example in classrooms to show students that everyone has different strengths and that judging people quickly is never fair. Dr. Michael Carter also had a lot to think about after the challenge. At first, he felt embarrassed. He had been very confident and even proud when he challenged Chuck Norris. But the test results had shown him that intelligence was bigger and more complex than he had believed. It was not only about academic knowledge or public speaking. It was about respect, experience, and the courage to accept new ideas. The professor learned an important lesson about humility. He realized that being smart was not a reason to look down on others or make quick judgments. Instead, true intelligence included being open to new ways of thinking and understanding. Dr. Carter began to speak more about the value of respect and kindness in learning. He changed how he taught his students, rather than focusing only on tests and facts. He encouraged them to listen to different opinions and learn from all kinds of experiences. He wanted his students to know that being smart meant being humble and curious. The story of the IQ challenge became a key part of his teaching. Over time, Dr. Carter earned even more respect from his students and colleagues, not just for his knowledge, but for his honesty and growth. He showed that even experts can learn important lessons from unexpected places. The challenge between the professor and Chuck Norris became more than a simple competition. It became a story about breaking stereotypes and learning respect. It showed that people from very different worlds can come together and teach each other valuable lessons. The world started to talk more about what intelligence really means. Many realized that it cannot be measured by one test or one number. Intelligence is about problem solving, creativity, kindness, and the willingness to keep learning. It is about how we treat others and how open we are to new ideas. People also learn to be careful about judging others quickly. The story reminded everyone that public images or titles do not tell the whole truth. A person might surprise you if you take the time to understand them. Chuck Norris and Dr. Carter's story became a symbol of respect and humility. It inspired many to be kinder and more understanding in their own lives. It showed that respect is the foundation of true intelligence. The challenge also helped to bring different groups of people closer. Fans of Chuck Norris, followers of Dr. Carter's academic work, found common ground in the lessons of respect and open-mindedness. This created new conversations and friendships. In the end, both men became stronger, not just in their skills or knowledge, but in character. Chuck Norris showed that humility and kindness are powerful forms of intelligence. Dr. Carter proved that true wisdom comes from being willing to learn and change. Their story was told in schools, workplaces, and homes for many years. It helped people understand that intelligence is many things, not just test scores or degrees. It is about respect, learning, and treating others with kindness. For Chuck Norris, the challenge was another chapter in a life lived with quiet strength and respect. For Dr. Carter, it was a humbling experience that made him a better teacher in person. Together, they showed the world that when we respect each other and stay open to learning, we all grow smarter and kinder, and that is the real meaning of intelligence. When the results of the IQ test were announced, a wave of surprise and excitement spread quickly. Many people had expected Dr. Michael Carter, the professor, to score much higher than Chuck Norris. After all, the professor had years of formal education and experience teaching difficult subjects. But the numbers told a different story. Chuck Norris scored very well better than many people thought possible. In some areas, like problem solving and pattern recognition, Chuck's score was even higher than Dr. Carter's. The professor had done well, too, but his results did not match the confidence he had shown before the test. For some, it was a moment of shock. For others, a moment of inspiration. News outlets, social media, and everyday conversations all buzzed with reactions. Some people began to laugh at the professor's earlier confidence, saying he had been too proud. Others praised Chuck Norris, saying he was more than just a tough action star. He was someone with real intelligence and wisdom. The professor faced a difficult moment. His reputation had taken a hit, especially because he had publicly challenged Chuck Norris and spoken confidently about winning. Now he had to deal with the reality that he had underestimated his opponent. It was not easy for him, but Dr. Carter knew he had to accept the results and learn from the experience. In private, the professor reflected deeply. He realized that his pride had blinded him. He had judged Chuck Norris only by his public image as a fighter and actor. He had forgotten that intelligence is not only about academic knowledge but also about life skills, experience, and common sense. The test had shown him that he had much to learn about humility and respect. At the same time, Chuck Norris remained humble and kind. He did not boast about his score or try to make the professor look bad. Instead, he used the opportunity to speak about important lessons. In interviews and public talks, Chuck said that intelligence comes in many forms. He reminded people that respect, kindness, and a willingness to learn are as important as any test score. Chuck's words inspired many people. Some said they had always admired him for his strength and courage, but now they saw him as a role model for wisdom and humility as well. Parents shared the story with their children to teach them about respecting others and not judging people by appearances or rumors. The media covered the story in many ways. Some focused on the surprising test results, while others shared the lessons about respect and open-mindedness. Social media exploded with memes and discussions, but most were positive. Many users celebrated how Chuck Norris had quietly proven that intelligence is not only about being a professor or having a fancy degree. Dr. Carter also spoke to the media. He admitted that he had been wrong to underestimate Chuck Norris, thanked Chuck for accepting the challenge with dignity, and said the experience had changed him. He told people that intelligence is a broad and complex thing, and that no one should judge others quickly or unfairly. The story did not end there. Schools and universities began to use the challenge as a teaching example. Teachers talked about it in class, encouraging students to respect different kinds of intelligence. They emphasized that learning is a lifelong journey and that wisdom comes from many places, not just books. Many people in the community also felt a renewed sense of respect for both men. Chuck Norris was seen not only as a famous actor and martial artist, but also as a humble man who valued knowledge and respect. Dr. Carter was respected for his courage to face the challenge and admit his mistakes. This event also brought attention to how society often judges people too quickly. It showed that stereotypes and assumptions can be wrong and harmful. People learned to appreciate others for their true qualities, not just for their public image or titles. Chuck Norris continued his life quietly, but with a new respect for many. He used his influence to encourage young people to work hard, respect others, and keep learning. He reminded everyone that intelligence is about more than tests. It is about how we live and treat others. Dr. Carter changed his approach to teaching and public speaking. He became more careful about how he spoke about others and focused more on encouraging respect and open-mindedness. His students noticed the change and admired his honesty and growth. The challenge between the professor and Chuck Norris became a story told for years, was remembered not as a battle between brains and brawn, but as a lesson about respect, humility, and the many faces of intelligence. People who heard the story felt inspired to be kinder and more understanding. They realized that everyone has something valuable to offer, and that true intelligence includes heart and character. In the end, the challenge did more than test IQ scores. It brought people together, opened minds, and reminded the world that respect and humility are the greatest signs of true intelligence.